Meet Countess Elizabeth Báthory, a 16th-century Hungarian noblewoman widely considered the most prolific female murderer in history. Known as the Blood Countess, she allegedly tortured and killed hundreds of young women between 1585 and 1609, with some witness accounts claiming up to 650 victims. Her reported methods were extremely brutal, including driving needles under fingernails, forcing victims into freezing conditions, and covering them in honey to attract insects. She is most famously linked to the chilling legend that she bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth and beauty. However, modern historians argue that this story is likely a myth, as it only appeared in records more than a century after her death. In 1610, authorities finally arrested her, but due to her powerful noble status, she was never put on trial or executed. Instead, she was confined within her own castle, where she remained isolated until her death in 1614. Even today, some researchers question her guilt, suggesting she may have been the victim of a political conspiracy aimed at seizing her wealth and power. Meet Griselda Blanco, the ruthless godmother of cocaine who terrorized Miami in the 1970s and 80s. Born into poverty in Colombia, Blanco's life of crime started early. She reportedly committed her first murder at just 11 years old when a kidnapping went wrong. She eventually pioneered the violent Miami drug trade, building a massive cocaine empire that raked in up to $80 million a month. Blanco was a criminal innovator who designed custom lingerie with secret compartments to sneak cocaine past U.S. border guards. However, it was her cold-blooded brutality that earned her the nickname the Black Widow. She is suspected of ordering over 250 assassinations, killing rivals, innocent bystanders, and even orchestrating the murders of her own husbands. She is also credited with inventing the notorious motorcycle drive-by shooting. After spending nearly 2 decades in U.S. prisons, she was deported back to Colombia in 2004. In a twist of poetic justice, Blanco met her ultimate end in 2012 by the very execution method she created. She was gunned down in the street by a hitman on a motorcycle. Irma Grese, notoriously known as the Beautiful Beast, was one of the most sadistic female guards of the Nazi regime. Joining the SS at only 18 years old, she quickly rose through the ranks to become a senior SS supervisor at Auschwitz-Birkenau, where she held authority over approximately 30,000 female prisoners. Grese was infamous for her extreme ruthlessness, habitually wearing heavy boots and carrying a pistol and a custom-made plated whip, which she used to beat prisoners mercilessly. Survivors testified that she savaged inmates with trained, half-starved dogs and actively participated in selections for the gas chambers. Most disturbingly, authorities found lampshades made from the skins of 3 inmates in her hut. Captured at Bergen-Belsen, she showed no remorse during her trial. She was convicted of murder and hanged in 1945 at age 22, making her the youngest woman executed under British law in the 20th century. Wu Zetian remains the only female emperor in Chinese history, ruling for nearly 50 years through a combination of brilliant strategy and cold-blooded ruthlessness. Starting as a low-level concubine, she manipulated her way to the throne, eventually founding her own Zhao dynasty. To secure her power, she was reportedly merciless, eliminating anyone, including her own children, who stood in her way. She is infamously accused of strangling her own infant daughter to frame a rival, though modern historians suggest this may be biased slander from later male scholars. More certain are her purges of the aristocracy and her brutal treatment of enemies, such as allegedly mutilating rivals and turning them into human pigs. While she was an effective administrator who expanded the empire, her legacy is defined by a dominant and ambitious personality that stopped at nothing to hold the dragon throne. Agrippina the Younger was the ultimate power player of early imperial Rome, described by historians as ambitious, ruthless, and highly intelligent. Born into the prestigious Julio-Claudian dynasty, she was the great-granddaughter of Augustus, sister to the erratic Caligula, and mother to the infamous Nero. Her path to power was paved with cunning and manipulation. After returning from an exile sparked by a failed plot to kill her brother Caligula, she seduced her uncle, Emperor Claudius, and convinced the Senate to change incest laws so they could marry. Once she became empress, she pressured Claudius to adopt her son Nero as her heir, effectively sidelining his biological children. Many ancient sources believe she finally poisoned Claudius with a dish of mushrooms to secure Nero's immediate rise to the throne. Agrippina was likely the most powerful woman in the world during her time, ruling as an equal partner to her husband and appearing on imperial coins, a first for a living empress. However, her overbearing control eventually turned her son against her. After she miraculously survived a bizarre accidental shipwreck orchestrated by Nero, he eventually sent soldiers to assassinate her in 59 CE. Although ancient male historians often painted her as a villain, modern analysis suggests she was a trailblazer who bypassed traditional barriers to rule the Roman Empire. Olga of Kiev was the 10th century regent of Kievan Rus, whose name became synonymous with cold, calculated revenge. After her husband, Prince Igor, was brutally murdered by the Drevlian tribe in 945, the killers had the audacity to send envoys suggesting she marry their prince. Olga responded with 4 legendary acts of vengeance. First, she tricked the Drevlian envoys into being carried in their boat to a trench where she had them buried alive. Next, she requested a group of the tribe's most distinguished men to visit her. She invited them into a bathhouse and burned them alive. For her third act, she traveled to the Drevlian territory for a funeral feast, waited until her enemies were intoxicated, and then ordered her soldiers to slaughter 5,000 of them. Finally, during a year-long siege of the Drevlian capital, she demanded a tribute of 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house. She had her soldiers attach burning sulfur to the birds, which flew back to their nests and burned the entire city to the ground. The ultimate historical twist? This ruthless warrior later became the first ruler of Rus to convert to Christianity and is today a canonized saint honored as equal to the apostles. Born Shi Yang in 1775, the woman history remembers as Zheng Yi Sao rose from working in a floating brothel to becoming arguably the most successful pirate in history. After marrying pirate leader Zheng Yi in 1801, she helped him consolidate rival gangs into a massive confederation. When he died in 1807, she seized total control of the Red Flag Fleet. At her peak, she commanded roughly 70,000 pirates and over 1,000 vessels, a force that outnumbered the Chinese Imperial Navy 3-1. She maintained order through a ruthless legal code. Disobeying an order, theft from the common fund, or desertion resulted in immediate beheading. She was equally strict regarding captives, making the sexual assault of female prisoners a capital offense. Her fleet was so dominant that she obliterated the Qing Navy in multiple battles and successfully fended off the superior firepower of the Portuguese and British. In a final act of strategic genius, she negotiated a general pardon in 1810 when she realized the tides were turning. Unlike almost every other pirate in history, she retired with her wealth intact, secured government positions for her crew, and lived out her days running a successful gambling house until dying peacefully at age 69. Mary was England's first ever Queen Regnant, a woman who seized the throne with staggeringly bold ambition in 1553 after unseating Lady Jane Grey. Once in power, her dominant aim was to end the religious schism with Rome and restore the Catholic faith to England. She is most famously and ruthlessly remembered for ordering approximately 280 to 300 Protestants to be burned at the stake as heretics. These high-profile victims included Archbishop Thomas Cranmer and Bishops Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley. This brutal 5-year campaign earned her the enduring epithet Bloody Mary, a title solidified in the public imagination by Protestant propaganda like John Fox's Book of Martyrs. While her father, Henry VIII, ordered significantly more executions overall, the concentrated intensity of her religious burnings was unprecedented in English history and remains the defining mark of her legacy. Irene of Athens is a name synonymous with cold-blooded ambition. Originally a minor noble from Athens, she married into the Byzantine imperial family and became regent for her 9-year-old son, Constantine VI, in 780 AD. However, when Constantine reached adulthood and attempted to rule in his own right, Irene refused to surrender her authority, leading to a bitter, years-long struggle for the throne. In 797, Irene orchestrated a horrifying coup. She had her own son arrested and dragged to the Porphyra chamber, the very room where he had been born, to have his eyes gouged out. Constantine likely died from the brutal procedure, leaving Irene to rule as the first woman to ever govern the Byzantine Empire alone. Ironically, despite this heinous act, Irene was canonized as a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church because she officially ended the first period of iconoclasm, restoring the use of religious icons. Her ruthless reign ended in 802 AD when she was deposed by her finance minister and exiled to the island of Lesbos, where she died a year later. Isabella I of Castile was far more than a pious queen. She was one of history's most ruthless consolidators of power. She secured her throne through a bloody civil war and solidified her authority by demolishing the castles of rebellious nobles who dared to defy her. In 1478, she established the Spanish Inquisition, which she used as a political weapon to execute crypto-Jews and seize the wealth of influential families to fund her military campaigns. Her most infamous act of intolerance was the 1492 Alhambra Decree, which forced over 100,000 Jews to convert to Catholicism or face immediate execution and exile. That same year, she completed the Reconquista by conquering Granada and subsequently ordered the forced conversion or expulsion of its Muslim population. Finally, her sponsorship of Christopher Columbus exported this absolute authority across the Atlantic, initiating the colonization and subjugation of the Americas. By centralizing power through state-controlled religious terror, Isabella forged Spain into a dominant global empire.